Well, Rebone Tau is a political analyst and joins me now. Rebone, it's lovely to have you back with us. He is defending himself and seeming to be quite satisfied with the job that he has done. Certainly, he's got that endorsement now from his own branch, Chiawelo in Soweto. Not entirely unexpected.
I mean, one of the things that when you speak to some within the ANC, especially on the issue of the second term, they've been raising that he has failed as the president of the ANC and the president of the country. And I think he's using this opportunity to speak to members of the ANC to say, I've not really failed, there were challenges and so forth, so that he can get that second term. It's not going to be an easy one for him. He knows that too. It's going to be a very difficult one. Anything is possible with this conference.
You know, the anything is possible scenario seems to be coming up quite often when you think of, you know, immediate and historical developments in the ANC, you know, given that they would want to see someone actually serve out an entire term, because that has been as elusive as, you know, as a unicorn for the ANC, having a president that could see through the full terms. All of these other underlying challenges, the various conferences and so on. Share with us how developments in KZN are also affecting the national elective picture, with you know, what we heard from Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, this notion of former President Jacob Zuma being in the ring for the position of chairmanship.
I think, you know, if you listen to Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma last week, one of the things that she's also trying to do is to get members of the ANC to sympathize with her. And I'll tell you why. The issue of the step aside. She's been sitting in this NEC for the past 5 years, and those of the RT felt that after the conference, she dumped them and just continued with her life. So she's trying to say, comrades, I'm still with you. And I can tell you after that interview, most of them within the RT are saying, we are not coming with her. And this now then becomes interesting. After this defiance by some within the RT in terms of the full soldiers, then you see that now the former president, Jacob Zuma, now is available to be national chair of the ANC, which is very something interesting. I mean, we have never seen a former president since 1991 coming back to be the national chair of the ANC. So it shows that he's trying also to push comrades to support him, because he feels that probably the Nkosazana card won't work for him. He has to do it himself. But unfortunately for him also, you've got Dr. Zweli Mkhize, who seems to be getting overwhelming support. If you look at when you look at some of the BGM forms, because these days what is very interesting, immediately after the BGM seats, you will see comrades from different branches taking photos of the nomination to show who was nominated. And when you go to KwaZulu-Natal, you see that Dr. Zweli Mkhize is finding expression, he's getting support from that province.
You used the word interesting with respect to former President Jacob Zuma. It's also curious, isn't it, why he'd want to do that? As a former president, of course, he has unfettered access to the NEC. He becomes, in effect, a permanent member of the NEC. What do you think his personal ambitions are all about?
I mean, if you're a national chair, you chair the meeting, you give direction to the meeting. So obviously, he will then want to now push whatever that he wants to push as the national chair to make sure that he drives the agenda that he would want to drive within the National Executive Committee meetings of the ANC.
So all of these personalities are packing their bags and preparing for a journey. What does this all mean in terms of the circling of the wagons for Ramaphosa?
You know, he might be damned at conference, and I'll tell you why.
Really?
Today's nomination process gives an indication to that. I mean, him and Paul Mashatile are both from Gauteng province. We leave Nomvula Mkwanyana, who is also nominated as DSG, and Pule Mabi as the Treasurer General in that branch. Now, when you look at that, you see that even Gwede Mantashe has been dumped by this, whether CR17 faction, you know, that now they're going with Stan Mathabate. So I'm telling you, watch the space. You will see that Zweli Mkhize is going to give him a run for his money going to December, because this also discussions between provinces, it's also saying in a way that we know that Paul Mashatile, if you know Lebogang Maile grew up from Xhosas. He's always been a Paul Mashatile boy. So this PEC is more sympathetic to Paul Mashatile than the president. He's got no control over the PEC. But in KwaZulu-Natal, we know that Zweli Mkhize is working very close with the PEC of KwaZulu-Natal.
So you think treacherous terrain for the president, a more solid foundation for Paul Mashatile, given some of the pillared alliances that are already in his favor. You mentioned Gwede Mantashe, not a great week for him. I know we discussed a little bit about that earlier with Mbazima Shilowa, about how he, he's routing essentially at the COSATU Federation elective conference. Is a metaphor in some ways for how COSATU sees the ANC in the tripartite alliance. I'll be very interested to hear what your reading of that was.
I will not want to speak about that. I will want to speak about when I engage with ANC members on what happened to Gwede Mantashe.
Right.
Most of them say he deserves it. Most of them are saying that he's arrogant, and some are saying it's his time to retire. So he's also finding a very difficult, finding himself in a very difficult situation within the party, where members of the party are saying, no, we're fed up with Gwede Mantashe.
So do you think that there's going to be a vacancy in that position as well?
I mean, Stan Mathabane seems to be getting joy and support from different provinces. This then also means a very difficult one for the Eastern Cape. You have Oscar Mabuyane, who's got interest to be the deputy president, and then yes, Gwede Mantashe, as they have pronounced. And now this thing of Oscar Mabuyane falling out, that means that the Eastern Cape province finds itself in a very difficult position. And when you speak to some within the Dr. Zweli Mkhize's faction, we have seen that KwaZulu-Natal, for an example, the PEC has pronounced Phumulo Maswana that they want him as the Secretary General to Dr. Zweli Mkhize. That this means that they might lose some numbers to Phumulo, because then they know that Phumulo's got a backing of KwaZulu-Natal. You
know, Rebone, every time I talk to you, you kind of, in a weird way, whether it's Schadenfreude or what, kind of anticipate this conference more than you ever did, given just the many nuances around the backdoor machinations and the kind of horse trading that is happening behind the scenes, in some ways to re-energize some people's sort of flailing political careers, or to seriously threaten those who think that they're in power and that they're unchallengeable. The bigger question is the ANC's fortunes in 2024. How much a multiple changing of the guard might affect their position to be able to consolidate, provide stability, and be a voice that can garner at least a majority of votes in the country, or become completely self-annihilated by the internal leadership battles. How do you see all these changes that you say are likely to happen affecting that long-term goal?
The ANC, where it is currently, as it goes and nominates not only the top 6, but also the 80 additional members, needs to look at members who are not going to be only depending on the ANC for deployment. It needs to look at people who will say, we'll give our lives for the ANC, like we saw during the apartheid, where a lot of people, when they joined the ANC, it was to sacrifice their lives. So today you have careerists within the ANC, people who use this as a machinery, this conference, to make sure that they have a seat at the table to negotiate to be ministers or deputy ministers, or also to be in parliament. So the ANC has to really have a balance of and trying to deal with this internal fights, because once you have a balance of those who are really committed to just being volunteers of the ANC, then you're able then to minimize the internal factional battles that we might see after this conference going to 2024 about who must become members of parliament, because people will want to be in the top 50, for an example, just to be safe, because they can see that the numbers for the ANC are not looking good based on the 2019 national elections and the 2021 local government elections.
Interesting times, as I keep saying every time we speak. Rebone, thank you for sharing your insights on the internal functionings of the ANC, where some of those conversations are leading us, and what we might expect come the end of the year. We will have a lot of conversations, I have no doubt, in the run-up to that event come the end of the year. Rebone Tau is a political analyst, sharing her views on this re-endorsement by President Cyril Ramaphosa in his capacity as president of the party from his own branch in Chiawelo in Soweto.